Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So, I was going to talk a little bit about the home prices and how they have elevated over the last couple of years. Really, what has taken place right now is the separation between the rich and the poor, the inequality that is going to continue to grow, and there's no better evidence of it than property ownership and how easy or difficult it is to get into a home or property in general. Just trying to become a property owner has become incredibly difficult for the average person. Like, even I just take my own case, for example. Like, I purchased a home or put money down on a home. I'm not actually purchased it, I'm purchasing it, I'm making payments on a home here in my local area 2.5 years ago, and today I would not be able to buy that same home. Not only would I not be able to afford the interest payments that would now be uh, attached to the mortgages, but I would not be able to pay the elevated price that has also taken place over the last couple of years. And this is something that is not what anybody was expecting. When the interest rates went up, home prices were going to come down. Everybody thought that. I mean, you could go back a couple of years and you could find nobody talking anything else but that. Like, that was the common narrative out there, is that they are going to raise rates. That is going to cause the mortgage rates to go up. People would not be able to afford the homes, and the home prices would have to come down to meet the capabilities of the buyers out there. That seemed very logical by saying that. That's not what took place. That's not even what happened. Home prices have continued to move up. And I always go back and I think about how many homes are being sold in all cash purchases. It's like a third of all homes right now. The ones that are selling in cash, and they're selling at this elevated price. These cash purchases do not care where interest rates are. They are willing to pay at this price regardless of where interest rates are at. And now when I think about elevated interest rates bringing the prices down, that did not happen. If we continue into the future with lower interest rates, how is that's going to bring prices down? Like, everybody's anticipating some sort of housing market crash coming into the future. Some people will say, no, it's going to come in 2025 now. Well, I've been hearing this for quite some time. Like, essentially since I started my channel, every single month, every single year, every single prediction, every administration change, everything that has to come from the Federal Reserve is always anticipating some sort of housing market crash, and everybody is saying that it's because nobody can afford these prices. But I don't believe that's true. Now, I believe that the majority of the people can't afford these prices, but I do believe that there are people out there who are willing to pay at this price. And the reason why they're paying at this price is because there's no better position to be in to separate yourself from the poor than to be in a property ownership position. Like you go back through history, and there's really nothing else out there that will separate you from the poor or show the inequality outside of property ownership does. Now, you could be the capitalist where you invest into stocks and bonds and businesses out there, putting your money towards something that's going to have a return. And you don't necessarily have to be in property ownership, and you can be on the other side of that wedge and separate yourself from the poor, right? To not suffer the issues of inequality the older you get. Because the older you get, the worse the inequality is on you. The more you have to work in order to try and get on the other side of that wedge. It becomes very difficult the longer that time goes on. And so if you see it, if you recognize what it is that's causing the inequality here in the United States and just about anywhere in the world, it's always the same story. It's always the same economic forces that are taking place. Recognizing it can be a little difficult between the governments and different banking systems and new innovations and technologies that come about. Cell phones and airplanes have changed the way a lot of things are conducted, but the underlying economic forces are still the same. And if you have new money that comes into the system on a regular basis, you are going to find separation taking place. The inequality grows as new money comes in. And what I find very humorous about having like a political environment as pronounced as we do right now, all these political pundits come out and say, hey, we have an idea that is going to benefit you. And what I find completely Like, I mean, what I find is not only, like, I don't even know how to quite describe this, because they're not lying. I believe that the politicians believe that they are that they believe their thoughts, right? Their ideas, their, you know, concepts for what it is that can happen. But very few ever really talk about what it is that it would take in order for you to fix this system, right? To understand that when new money comes in, it separates the rich from the poor. That new money comes in, people who have first access to that money spend it at face value. When they spend that money at face value, it takes time for it to eventually trickle down into the economy. By the time we get our hands on it, all the prices have moved up and the purchasing power has been depleted. And now this is essentially talking about the Cantillon effect. And once you recognize it, once you see it, you know that any effort coming from the political side of things means that there is going to be new money pouring into the system. No matter which direction that new money comes in, I don't care if you inject it right into the hands of the poor people, it will still create a separation between the rich and the poor. That money will get spent in a way that benefits the rich, and more separation will take place. The only way that you can create a situation in which that the average everyday person will be able to afford property ownership again is to have a complete crash of the system. The standard of living being depleted as much as possible, and then begin to start a production saving economy again. This is not something that can happen overnight, and there's nothing that a politician can do to create an environment that is going to be a pleasurable experience to acquire that position. It's just not going to happen. And so to understand that as the new money pours in, your ability to get into property ownership is going to become even increasingly more difficult. You are going to have to take on a strategy that is going to be different from what our parents and grandparents had done. They were able to go and get a decent job and be able to find that decent job providing them with the ability to have a standard of living that was adequate for their needs. One income providing for the wife and kids and household and college and retirement, vacation, all the stuff, right? All the stuff. That's no longer available. Even a good job sucks. So we have to understand that because of the way that the money has come into the system and separated the rich from the poor, and that there is nothing that a politician is going to do to fix that, because in fixing it means incredible amount of pain and suffering amongst the people, they're never going to do it. But what they will do is try to inject new money into the system and bring you a pleasurable experience from that. Unfortunately, you will find that the wedge will get deeper because of it. And there's really very little that a politician can do to reverse this situation without experiencing massive amounts of pain. Property ownership is going to become very, very difficult going into the future. And all the people who are hoping and wishing and dreaming and praying for a situation in which that those property prices will come down, don't wish for it. The economic environment will look incredibly bad. Jobs will be very few, right? Transactions will become very infrequent. The ability to grow and expand in a business will be almost none. Don't worry, Gavin Newsom going. Let's see, don't worry, Gavin Newsom is going to give illegal immigrants $150,000 to buy a house. Man, that's incredible. I got some homeless lady yelling at me right now. I might have to move because she's a little annoying. Let me just do that, guys. Hold on 1 second. I'm just going to drive down the road over here a little ways because she's obviously a little too much today. So, move on. She's still pointing and yelling at me. It's funny. Hold on. Grab my camera. Alrighty. You know, you try and find a nice, peaceful place to do a live stream, and alright, we'll just cruise over here real quick, guys. Thank you for being patient with me. We're gonna cruise down here to this little shady spot right over here. Alright. There we go. Alright, we're back at it. All right, thank you for your patience on that. I mean, I feel bad for a lot of the mental illness that a lot of these people are suffering through. She's been yelling over there pretty much for hours now, and then she saw that I was sitting in my car and decided to come over and start yelling at me. I kind of know who she is. I recognize her from, being in the area and stuff, and I've talked with her in the past, and it sucks. I mean, they're definitely in survival mode. Everything is, a painful experience for them. It's very difficult, to try and, even just make it through the day without feeling as much, frustration and hate and stuff towards the world. I feel sympathy towards them, right? I mean, I don't know what it is I can do. I've tried offering, in the past and stuff like that, but really at this point, this is just their life. This is what it is. And I can't imagine what it would take for an individual like that to get off the streets. Like, the mental deterioration that has happened over the years. Like I said, I've known this lady for a while, and the mental deterioration is like, it's not repairable. Like, I mean, I guess it is repairable, but like the insane amount of therapy and effort and time and energy and everything that it would take to go into her to bring her up to a position in which that she could be functioning within society, like having a job and paying the bills and all that other stuff. I just don't see it happening. Like, it's just like at this point, it's too far gone. So anyway, thank you for your patience on that, guys. All right, moving on. Let's talk about housing. See, again, like, how the hell is she ever going to find an apartment around here when the cheapest apartment is $1,800 a month? I mean, it's just not happening. All right. We have a first create healthy, sustainable spaces and community. Yeah, she is. All right. Poor diet adds to mental decline. Warren Buffett is sitting on $276 billion. Yeah. Toronto is down at least 30% in 6 months. Yeah, now, again, I think about it, like even my own area, like I think about the percentage. When you say 30% down in 6 months and all that other stuff, where are we talking from? Right? Because my house I take for, just consideration, right? I mean, it was an expensive house in an expensive area, and it shouldn't have cost that much, and I shouldn't have paid that much, but I like the area I'm in, so anyway, that's what I did. However, the price of the house had gone up dramatically, and now when I say dramatically, like I'm talking 20%, probably, at least. Like, it went up 20, probably even 25%. And now when I think about how much that have moved up, right? And all of a sudden, here prices have moved down dramatically. Like, it shot up like a bullet, right? And then it came down. Like, again, ZELLE estimates, you can take it or leave it for what it is. But when I looked at those prices and the way they moved up, if I was to post my house at the ZELLE estimate on what it was, and then decide that I'm going to take some money off the price of it to try and get it to move, I could move it significantly. Like, I mean, put it out there for like $650,000 and then take $50,000 off the price tag and still have an elevated price from the price that I had, or elevated self price for it from the price that I had paid. So it's like, I think about where interest, or where the percentage is getting that number from. Like, is it getting it from over the course of the last year when prices had moved up dramatically, or is it taken into consideration, maybe 2 years or 3 years worth of price movements, right? Because that could be a very different starting place from where the percentage is moving from. Like, again, I buy my house, it moves up dramatically, then I knock 10% off of the price of it, and people are like, look, it's come down 10%. Yeah, no, not really. I mean, it's still elevated by 20%, and so it depends on where it is that you're getting that number from. All right, moving on here. Someone on YouTube said that if feds left interest rates as they are now for 5 years, the housing market would reconcile itself to a true natural economy in line with wages. Thoughts? Okay, here's the thing. Do you remember how quickly mortgage rates moved the moment that the Federal Reserve said that they were raising rates? Do you remember back then? It takes a little bit, like, not a lot of people remember exactly like the month of it happening, but mortgage rates shot up almost immediately, like over the course of a few weeks. Like, they went from 3% up to like, 8% over the course. I forget like the exact number of how long it took, but it was a very short amount of time. Considering that the Federal Reserve was, kind of working up incrementally, moving up to the 5.5% or 5.25%, 5.5% where they ended up landing. The mortgage rates moved almost immediately and then plateaued off while the Federal Reserve kept raising rates. So that argument of the Federal Reserve, right, let's see here, that if they left interest rates right where they're at, did that, like, if they left interest rates right where they're at, is that the main thing that has taken place within the market, the interest rate setting policy of the Federal Reserve, that caused the mortgage rates to go where they are? See, like, did the Federal Reserve set the mortgage rates, or is the market setting the mortgage rates, considering that the Federal Reserve started raising rates, but the mortgage rates shot up immediately, plateaued off, while the Fed was continuing to raise rates? They were remaining flat, elevated, but flat across the board, right? For the most part, they, fluctuate a little bit. But they didn't continue to keep lockstep with the Federal Reserve as they were raising rates, meaning like, every time the Fed raised rates, the mortgage rates went up, right? Like, you would think that these two would work together if they were, if they were correlated, which they are somewhat, but not definitely, not in the way that a lot of people want to give it the consideration, right? They think that the Federal Reserve raising rates causes the mortgage rates to go up. And that's true in a sense, but not necessarily in the same fashion in which that people are relating it to, meaning that the Fed moves and the mortgage rates moves. Fed moves, mortgage rates moves. Right? The mortgage market took into consideration where it is that the Federal Reserve was going with their rates and positioned themselves ahead of time, way ahead of the Federal Reserve. So that's why the mortgage rate shot up, plateaued off, because the market itself found its position, saying, hey man, those bonds, those mortgage-backed securities, the price has fallen, the yield has risen, that's my position, I'm in. So when the market started finding position inside of those bonds, they caused the mortgage market to plateau off. Like they said, that's it, that's my price on those bonds, I'm willing to buy in at this price. The Federal Reserve, they were backing off. They're like unwinding their mortgage-backed securities, they're raising interest rates, and that position should have caused the rates to go up, but the market looked at that and said, hey, that position is good for me. I don't care what the Federal Reserve is doing. I'm into that. That's me right there. And so as they were taking position in the mortgage markets, that found the position inside of the mortgage markets interest rates. Okay? And if that was to continue going into the future, the Federal Reserve could raise rates or lower rates or do whatever they're doing. It's the market itself who is finding where the mortgage rates are. Now, granted, could they influence it some? Sure. They got a balance sheet full of mortgage-backed securities. They could dump out a bunch of these, or they could start purchasing them. Right? Now, that would influence the mortgage market dramatically. But right now, what we are finding is that the market is finding the position. The market has found that position on interest rates, not the Federal Reserve, right? And that's important to understand. Could they influence? Yes. If they started messing with their balance sheet, whether they started purchasing those mortgage-backed securities or selling more of them, I think that would have an impact on the interest rates over time. But at this point, they're not considering any of that stuff. So we have to look and see what is taking place, and that is the market has found where the mortgage rates should be. Right? Or else they wouldn't be here. They would be someplace, they'd either be lower or higher if the market didn't want to support the mortgages out there. That's really what's happening. I mean, this is where the investors found their position. All right. You think your house was, I wouldn't know because I'm not going to sell it, but do you think your house would sell until you put it on the market and get the sad news buyers aren't buying? Well, you put it on the market for 500, whatever I have it, the ZELLE estimate now at $550,000. Let people follow through on, looking at it or whatever, and then knock 10% off the price and take 50 grand off of it and see how much more you get, because I'm still significantly higher than where I had purchased it. So even on that, I could still take pricing off the, I could still lower the price and still sell it for a profit. Like, how much room do you need to move? How much profit do you want to make off of it? How eager are you to sell it? Like, I mean, I myself am not in a position in which that I would want to sell my home, nor do I have any anticipation of it, nor would, I'm not taking in that kind of strategy. All right, you should really only rent if you are planning on being there more than 5 years. If you're not planning on being there 5 years. I kind of agree, Kirk. I mean, there's a lot to be said for a position that most wealthy people are in. Most wealthy people have assets and no liabilities. Right? You think about it, a mortgage is a 30-year or 15-year, or it doesn't matter how long, it's a liability. You owe every single month. You have to come up with that money to pay it. Right? Assets, you don't have to do that with. Right? Assets pay you. Assets are valuable that don't cost you anything. Excuse me. And as most rich people would be 100% assets with zero liabilities, by renting, you have a 30-day liability. At the end of 30 days, your liability is gone. You're sitting back in 100% assets again. Now, I understand that a lot of people say, no, every time you're throwing money into rent, you're just throwing it away, making somebody else richer. Hey, that's true. I mean, I can get that, but you're also incredibly nimble, meaning that at the end of 30 days, if you have a place, someplace on the other side of the country that you could be making money, hell, you can travel there and be, free of all your obligations back where you were renting because you don't have but a 30-day liability. Right? So in being incredibly nimble and then using that positioning to then profit for yourself in a better way, meaning that, you do business over here, there, or wherever it is that you need to go, that would prove in the sense that renting at that point would have you 100% in assets, right? Which is where most wealthy people would be. All right. Let's go check out the super chat. Jared, $4.99 UE. Thanks for being you. Learned so much and positive effects from listening to you. Fed pivot could be back to expanding balance sheet versus cuts. Balance sheet adjustments for stimulus. I don't think that would work unless it was incredibly communicated incredibly well to the people themselves, because I don't believe that quantitative easing is inflationary in the sense that a lot of people would want to give it the consideration. Like if this the simple idea of printing money, quantitative easing, or balance sheet adjustments, like asset purchases, the quantitative easing, if that right there was the only thing needed to create an inflationary scenario, quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 would have been proving the case. Zero interest rate policy would have proven to be inflationary. It didn't happen. So we have to take in consideration that post the great financial crisis, low interest rate environment is not necessarily inflationary. If it was, the ZERP, right, zero interest rate policy, would have been massively hyperinflationary scenario. It didn't take place. So it's not necessarily the balance sheet adjustment that's going to be inflationary. What's going to be inflationary is inflation expectation of the people themselves behaving in a way that creates the inflationary environment going into the future. That's where the Federal Reserve is most likely trying to position the economy, is with an elevated inflation expectation. And we know this was to be the problem because of the stuff that we have studied, like monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world, in which that they said that the major problem they needed to face these days was an inflation expectation that was persistently too low rather than too high. By getting the inflation expectation to be elevated like they have, they are actually causing the inflationary scenario within the economy that then has them in the position in which that they can now conduct their monetary policy in a more efficient manner, meaning that they have interest rate adjustments now within their toolkit again. However, because that interest rate adjustment toolkit that they once had in their, or that they do have in their arsenal, had failed to produce the inflationary scenario that they were looking for, they had to come up with other tools in order to deal with monetary policy outside of balance sheet adjustments and interest rate adjustments. And mainly that policy tool, that new economic policy tool that they had developed over the last few years, was their words, their communication style. And their communication style has an incredible impact on the economy. In fact, it has more power on the economy than the rate cuts themselves, or the rate adjustments, I should say. Whether it's a cut or a rise, it doesn't matter. The communication about it has an incredible amount of impact on the economy, and you can actually see it today. I mean, you think about it, the Federal Reserve has done nothing, zero. There is no difference in anything that they have done for months. There's been some balance sheet adjustments that had taken place back in June, right? And I'm not trying to say that that wasn't impacting the economy. It did, but not a whole lot of people are looking at that balance sheet adjustment as the indicator of where rates are going to be going or what it is that is happening within the economy. So the Federal Reserve has done nothing, literally zero to their interest rate adjustments, but yet the market is now behaving in a way as if those rate cuts had taken place. This is something that I have been trying to explain for years. We knew it was coming. It's difficult to see, especially if you are not aware of the credible threat theory. If you are aware of the credible threat theory, you're understanding that it's signaling, jawboning, forward guidance that is now the main policy tool of the Federal Reserve and how their words impact the economy. We are breaking this stuff down daily. Every single day, I'm trying to provide you with evidence and showing in a clear way how the propagandized information guides the markets, but yet their communications, the central bankers' communications to each other, not the ones to the public, but to each other through their Fed speeches, through their own documents, has something very different in mind. Way different from what the propagandized mainstream media would like you to understand and believe, right? Because that is the monetary policy tool coming from the Federal Reserve. Once you recognize it, once you see it, it becomes so clear and obvious to you, right? And then you'll understand why it is that mortgage rates are moving outside of the Fed doing nothing at all. They're like sitting on their hands, right, with a microphone, and they're like, hey, blah 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 blah, right? And then the economy goes, yeah, right? And they totally react to this information even though they didn't do anything. And it's so like, if you knew that that was coming, it's obvious. Like, it's like you see it just as clear as day, right? But if this is new information and trying to understand what the credible threat theory is, it's very obscure and it's very difficult, and you're trying to give reason behind like maybe a political environment or something, and that's the reason why they're doing it, or environmental or something of that nature. It isn't. Like, I go through and break down speeches that have been written 25 plus years ago, even, or over 20 years ago, with a strategy in mind to deal with the fact that they were going to run into what they referred to as the lower bound of zero, meaning that once the Fed funds rate had hit zero, they knew that they had to come up with another way, right? And that other way is literally their words and how it is that the market receives that communication. Once you see it, it's like not a problem. It's like super easy to recognize. It's like you totally get it. You understand how come it is that they communicate the way they are. You understand why it is that the information has been propagandized in order to guide the markets, because they need the markets to act as if those rate cuts had happened, so they communicate it as clearly and definedly as possible without setting themselves up to be locked into that. They leave their interest rate adjustments open-ended, because that's part of the monetary policy, is to make sure that they leave themselves an out, a way to say, hey, if things change or if conditions are different or whatever, then we might have to adjust the way that we are doing things going into the future. Well, here's the thing, man. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same ever. So by them coming out and saying, hey, we are going to adjust rates going into the future if the data says we can. Well, the data is going to change, guaranteed, right? Nobody knows what the data is going to be by the time we get there. So understanding that they keep it open-ended so that they can guide the markets in the direction that they want to is part of their policy. It's the credible threat. All right, moving on here. We got 461 people watching. Thank you so much for being here. Get rid of status items, because when Furry Road kicks off, the environment will be different. If you don't pay off your mortgage by mid-50s, you mad some bad decisions. Oh, really? Yeah, well, I made some bad decisions in life. I can assure you that, man. I mean, I agree, because at 48 years old, trying to figure out what it is that I need to do in order to have some sort of retirement or, decent life and I got kids and I'm thinking college and I got all kinds of stuff. Yeah, I'm overwhelmed. Like there's like I don't know how the hell anybody's gonna make it. Like all the little things that I need to get done, which aren't little, they're actually huge. Yeah, that's I don't know how that's gonna all work. You know? So paying it off by mid-50s, no, that ain't happening. I would be lucky to get it paid off by the time I'm 70. And so, in a sense, I will never truly own my home. All right, the Fed has the mindset that never changes much, especially since easy AI. Monetary policy is data dependent. Ask the Fed. Data is different today than 25 years ago, I guarantee. Ah, damn it, I read another Luther. Man, you know, for somebody who hates this channel as much or gives me such a hard time, man, you know, you hear every single one. Russia will hold the BRICS summit in Kazan, whatever, from October 22nd to 24. California considering passing a law to allow $150K for illegal immigrants to buy a home. Well, yeah, I mean, if you needed to have the property ownership to be as tight as possible, to make the property owners as far away from the poor, there is no better way to do it than to provide people who would never be able to buy a home with the ability to buy a home. And you only have to get a handful of them to do it. It will elevate the prices off and it will cause even more separation between the rich and the poor. Like even more people will lose the ability to buy a house because they give this money to people who couldn't afford it. Right? All of a sudden you have this swelling of demand. What happens when you have a swelling of demand? Right? Supply-demand imbalances, prices go up. There is no better way to find how it is that the property owners are trying to separate themselves from the rest of the people out there than to provide ability for people who would not typically be able to get a home to get a home. That increases the demand. If you have increased demand, you will have prices moving up. You don't have to give it to all of them. You just have to give it to a few of them. Right? Same thing's happening here in Oregon. Right? Same thing. Interests go down, prices go up. But while you can. I don't know, right? Interest rates went up, prices didn't go down. So, I mean, is it necessarily prices go down or interest rates go down, prices go up? I mean, that's kind of the common narrative out there. But interest rates were zero policy that had taken place throughout the economy after the great financial crisis really only had asset prices going up in value, like things like asset prices, things that you borrow money for, right? The houses, stocks, bonds, stuff like anything you borrow money for, all that stuff went up in price. But your standard of living, that didn't cost that much more. That didn't go up that much. Living wages didn't go up that much. So really post the great financial crisis, all that money printing was just more proof of separation between the rich and the poor. As the properties went up, stocks went up, all the stuff that you borrow money to go, that you purchase, all those things went up, right? Because people who have first access to the money, people who borrow it first and buy those assets, they get to take advantage of the face value, and it separates the rich from the poor. So anytime you ever hear a politician say, hey, we're gonna put all this effort into the poor, right? What they are doing is creating that wedge to grow even more. Anytime they do that, the only way that they can prevent the wedge from going any deeper or bigger is to not spend the money, is to not have government stimulus packages, is to not have government intervention, is to not be taxing the people, is to not be participating in the economy in a way that people are begging and demanding the government to do. Right? The moment that they start to feel pain, they blame the politicians and say, you need to do something about this. It's your fault. And so the government says, well, I don't know what else to do other than, print up a bunch of money and throw it at you. And unfortunately, after the money is been spent, you are going to find it even more difficult to make it through this world. But you begged for it. So just go ahead and beg again and we'll throw you a bunch of money, and then there'll be even more separation between the rich and the poor. And since most politicians are probably property owners and capitalists, it only benefits them to continue to do that. So People vote for them. The poor people vote for them. Say, hey, man, you need to do something. Say, hey, we're going to do something. Here, a bunch of money, throw it at you. Boom, I'm richer from it. All right, and that's what ends up happening. All right. Where's that other super chat? I think I got to go. Yeah, guys, I'm going to have to call it quits here in just a second. All right, 5-pin bowler. I love the name, man. $5 Canadian. Thank you so much for the support, brother. While it did not happen instantly, over time you have changed my mind about the Fed. Thank you for all your efforts. Well, thank you, 5-pin bowler. I really appreciate the support, and I really appreciate that comment. You know, and I know a lot of times I come out here and it seems like I just rehash the same material over and over again. But being redundant with this stuff, knowing that there is so much miscommunication and misunderstanding, and then the horrible regurgitation of the crap stuff that the other economists share with each other is just so overwhelming at times. It's hard to be able to see clearly what it is that the Fed is doing. You set that stuff aside for just a minute and say, okay, I'm not going to listen to that, and I'm going to go through the communications of the Federal Reserve, communicating to the other central bankers out there, and try to break this stuff down. And once you have grasped that, right, once you see that part of it, and you look back to the mainstream media, you're like, aha, all right, I'm getting this now. There is two styles of communication. And because everybody is now focused, like 99% of the people are focused on the mainstream media, instead of diving deep into past, like, who's going to be reading speeches dated November 30th of 2018? Right? Nobody. Very few people are going to be going and doing the research of that. But however, if you did go through and read the research of it, you were going to find speeches like monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world that said this very thing. And you guys have heard me say this so many times, but I just love to reiterate it. Today, we face an altogether different set of problems stemming from a very low neutral interest rate. That is, the short-term real interest rate consistent with an economy operating at its potential alongside low and stable inflation. Ironically, the problem we need to solve these days is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. They were trying to create a situation in which that the people would feel that inflation was going to be persistently higher going into the future. They got it. They got it. They needed it in order to save their monetary policy. They needed to raise interest rates. They knew that the effective lower bound on the Fed funds rate meant that they no longer had monetary policy. It was over. And they knew it, and they recognized that this was going to be the case 20 years ago. And they set up the communication styles in order to conduct the economy and have markets perception doing the work of the Federal Reserve by moving interest rates ahead of their positioning. It is like, there's no other way to look at this, because this is the way that the Federal Reserve has communicated it to the other central bankers out there. The mainstream media has it wrong. They have purposely guided the markets with their perception of what it is that is coming into the future, because that is their monetary policy, is their jawboning words in order to guide the markets. So long as they have that, they will have their monetary tool. They don't need to adjust rates. Adjustments of rates is the secondary tool. It has less impact on the economy than their words do. Okay, I got to go back to work. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know. Thank you all for the support. Thank you so much. We have 439 people watching with 133 likes. I want to thank you, Brody. Thank you, Oneida, for being here, doing the work of the moderation. You guys are so awesome. And we got the 2 super chats. Thank you so much. Make sure I get that right. We got the 5-pin bowler and Jared, who both send off super chats. So thank you so much for the support for the channel. You guys are awesome. All right, everything in the empire of lies is an industry. Yeah, it is. All right. Can you see my comment? I can see your comment. Boost aholic. I like it. Okay, you guys are awesome. I got to go back to work. Hopefully this lady doesn't come and key my car or something. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.